Today we're talking about chicks with dicks. If this offends your sensibilities, then what the fuck are you doing on this channel? But anyway, you are fairly warned. This is really two separate legends, but they're similar in subject matter, so I decided to combine them into one. The first has to do with Final Fight. Final Fight was an arcade game made by Capcom, a side-scrolling beat-em-up with 3 characters to play as. It's a classic game and has been ported to various systems, remade, and had several sequels. What a lot of people don't know is that Final Fight was originally planned as a sequel to Street Fighter. Street Fighter was not a huge success, so Capcom decided to take the series in a different direction, and the game was originally entitled Street Fighter 89, as in 1989. Personally, I can't stand it when years are used in titles. All it does is horribly date the game a few years down the road. But anyway, early focus group research found that they didn't like the title, as it had nothing to do with Street Fighter, so they named the game Final Fight instead. Strangely enough, there would later be another one of those stupid year titles, Street Fighter 2010, which seemed really futuristic at the time, but now is literally last year. And the subtitle? The Final Fight. Even though Final Fight and Street Fighter are two separate series, they seem to exist in the same universe and cross over fairly often, such as Street Fighter characters like Chun-Li having cameos in the Final Fight games, or characters like Guy, Sodom, Cody, and Rolento appearing in Street Fighter games, most notably the Street Fighter Alpha series. Well, all that is pretty interesting, but we're here to talk about chicks with dicks, remember? Yeah. Those of you who played the original arcade version of Final Fight and the home ports may notice a slight difference in the enemies. In the original game, there were 2 female members of the Mad Gear gang to beat on, Poison and Roxy. You might have heard that Poison is actually a dude, and if you haven't heard this, I'm sorry to be the one to break the news, but yeah, it appears that Poison is indeed packing peen. As for Roxy, 100% woman as far as I know, though they look enough alike for that to be slightly disturbing. I mean, the only difference is that Roxy has orange hair and Poison has pink hair and slightly lighter skin. According to the official story from Capcom, Poison was indeed originally born a man, and lives as a woman, making her, or rather him, I guess, one of the rare transgendered video game characters. But really, how did this come about? Final Fight is not a series known for its story. After all, it literally involves moving to the right and beating the ever-loving shit out of every character you see, occasionally picking up weapons to use briefly, or eating food off of the ground to restore your health. What does it really matter if one of the generic enemies that you punch into oblivion several times throughout the course of the game packs peen or poon? There's no dialogue in the original game, and the story just involves rescuing Hager's daughter and ridding the city of crime. So how did this ever even come up? Well, we can thank Nintendo for this, as it's due to them that Poison is transgendered. Apparently, when Capcom was working on the first home port, the Super NES version of Final Fight, Nintendo took umbrage with the idea of beating on women. Now, you may find this odd, as they never had a problem with it before in games such as Double Dragon or Battletoads. But I guess it has to do with graphics being better now. Poison and Roxy were more obviously women, and Nintendo's policies were getting stricter in the 16-bit era. Apparently, someone from Nintendo contacted the creator of the game and told them they can't have a game where you go around punching women and beating them with lead pipes. And Capcom tried to get around it by saying, nah, it's not a chick, totally a dude. I guess maybe they thought Nintendo would think it's okay to beat on transvestites. But Nintendo saw through this line of bullshit, saying, no, you have to change it. So for the Super NES version, Poison and Roxy were turned into male characters named Sid and Billy. In other home ports, the female characters would occasionally remain, but usually they were censored to be less scantily clad than the original arcade version. Even Final Fight 1 on the Game Boy Advance, advertised as being the closest to the arcade version, replaces them with obviously male characters. Since the story came out, Capcom stuck with the idea of Poison being a man, but saying that Roxy was female and creating a story claiming that it creates some tension between the two characters. Poison appeared in various sequels and was playable in the Saturn game Final Fight Revenge, and appeared alongside Hugo in Street Fighter III as his manager. So yeah, that chick, totally a dude. But I cast doubt on the character originally being created with that in mind. After all, it was just a sprite and nothing more, and it wasn't common for generic enemies in a beat-em-up to have any sort of backstory, especially non-boss characters. It's clear that Poison was originally supposed to be female and was later changed so that Capcom wouldn't look like they out-and-out lied to Nintendo to get around censorship, even though that's obviously the case. So the final verdict, yes, Poison has a penis, but she wasn't originally meant to have one. Speaking of Nintendo, though, let's talk about this thing. Yeah, Birdo. Birdo originally appeared in the Famicom Disk System game Dream Factory Heart-Pounding Panic. When the sequel to Super Mario Bros. Was considered too hardcore for silly round-eye American dumbass gamers, they kept that one in Japan and took Dream Factory and changed some of the graphics, gave slight tweaks to the gameplay, and boom, Super Mario Bros. 2. Oddly enough, even though the game was already released in Japan, they released our version of Super Mario Bros. 2 in Japan later on as Super Mario USA. Yeah, thanks, assholes. If you ever wondered why they'd bothered doing this, the original Dream Factory game was actually not very successful, so this was a chance to have a wider audience play it. Anyway, Birdo. Birdo appears as a boss in most stages, ending with either a 1 or a 2, and occasionally appears as a sub-boss or even in the levels themselves. Birdo usually carries a crystal, though sometimes it carries a key or nothing at all. There are 3 types of Birdos in the game: pink, red, and green. The pink ones spit eggs at you, which you must pick up and throw back. The red ones occasionally throw fireballs as well, which can't be touched, and the green ones only throw fireballs, meaning that you have to find other ways to kill it other than using eggs. Since then, Birdo has appeared in various Mario spin-off games, usually paired with Yoshi, and as Nintendo has lately started pairing up all their Mario characters in romantic couples, it's said that Yoshi and Birdo are an item. Aw, isn't that cute? But wait, is Birdo a dude? Well, let's look into that. It's been said that Birdo is the most gender-confused character of all time in video games, and it's not hard to see why. In the original Super Mario Bros. 2 instruction manual, it claims that Birdo thinks he's a girl and would rather be called Birdetta. Oh, damn. I remember reading this when I was a kid and just thinking it was kind of funny. I was too young to really know about transgendered people, so I just figured Birdo was a dumbass. Of course, some people thought that exposing their children to men that would rather be women would, I guess, somehow corrupt their youth and lead towards the downfall of society, so it was later edited out of further releases of Super Mario Bros. 2, and the line from Nintendo is that Birdo is, and always has been, all woman. Now, before I look into that, let me clear up some more confusion about the character having to do with the name Birdo. Personally, I couldn't tell you why it's named Birdo when it's clearly not a bird, but a dinosaur. But because of that, a lot of people think Birdo is a bird, even the makers of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Well, despite that, the game's ending confused the matter even more, referring to Birdo as Ostro, and the Ostro character as Birdo. Well, my guess is that a translator figured naming a dinosaur character Birdo was a mistake, and gave the name to the character that was obviously a bird. But then again, Birdo isn't an ostrich either, and Ostro clearly is. Add to this the fact that in Japan, the character isn't named Birdo at all, but is named Catherine, who prefers to be called Kathy. Huh. Well, since then, there's been a split in opinion over Birdo's gender. In the American releases, Birdo is definitely a chick, and the pairing with Yoshi pretty much all but confirms that. Of course, I could point out that Yoshi lays eggs, which is more of a female characteristic, but, you know, so did Godzilla, and Godzilla is always referred to as male, so who knows? In Japan, however, Birdo is definitely something. I'm not saying definitely a male, but there's definitely a running gag of gender confusion. For example, the Japanese website for Mario Kart Double Dash proclaims, Yoshi no kanoju ni mai ti jitsuha kareshi. Translated, this means, appears to be Yoshi's girlfriend, or is that boyfriend? Various instruction manuals, official sites, and such have referred to Birdo as being gender confused, but Nintendo of Japan has never come out and said exactly whether or not Birdo's private parts dangle or not, preferring to leave it as being a running gag in the series. Perhaps the most interesting instance of this is in a game called Captain Rainbow for the Wii, a Japan exclusive. In the game, which was published by Nintendo, Birdo appears as a character who is arrested for attempting to use a ladies' room, and the police refuse to believe Birdo's insistences that she's female. Birdo, who, by the way, speaks with a deep, manly voice, gets out of imprisonment by claiming that the main character, Nick, is her boyfriend and that this proves she's female. course, we know that doesn't actually prove anything, but that's sort of the point of the bit anyway. So, like Poison, we come to the question, was Birdo originally envisioned as a transgendered character, or was it originally a female character that was changed to being transgendered, like Poison? Well, we can come back to the Japanese name for the character, Catherine, a clearly female name that leads one to believe that the character was originally envisioned as female. But the description of the character in the Japanese manual, which claims the character would rather be called Kathy, uses the male pronoun he, therefore being all the proof I need to proclaim this with all certainty. Birdo has a cock. Probably a big one. Sorry, Yoshi. These days, Nintendo uses female pronouns such as she and her to refer to Birdo, even in Japan, though I guess that's just polite. Man, that's enough of that for a lifetime. Join me next time and we'll talk about the PlayStation or something.